Carolina? Carolina?
Podem começar, como eu disse,
Okay.
e avisar pelo chat.
So, okay. My name is José Crespo de Carvalho. Just to give you a quick note about our organization, we are an executive education body of a public university, although we are a private one inside a public university, which is quite common in Europe. We are somehow very flexible in terms of adoption of new programs, new contents, new formats, etc. And we work like somehow, in some cases, like a company. In any case, we belong to a public university and also to 12 large companies that are also involved in this project. We started our work 37 years ago, and we have a lot of history in our market. What do we offer? Executive MBA, an executive MBA, which is a very good program. I think it's uh, among the 100 best programs by Financial Times in terms of executive MBAs in the world. We have executive masters, we have postgraduate programs, we have short duration programs. In these postgraduate programs, we have this particular program that Denise here with us coordinates, that is a program in place brand and place marketing, a postgraduate program, which is which has been very successful in its first edition. We also offer customized programs, customized specifically tailor-made for companies. And we also offer some services in the area of consultancy and so on and so forth. So that's what we do. Executive education in a broader sense. Um, and what I'm going to do is to um, pass the stage to invite Denise to walk to the stage to present Robert Govers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, José. Robert Govers it's hard to present because the place branders all know him. Robert Govers and Simon Arnold are the best place branders in the world. So Robert is the famous author of a famous book which is named Imaginative Communities, that has been awarded and translated to Portuguese and Spanish, besides English. He's the CEO of the main association of place brand, International Place Branding Association. He's also a lecturer, an international keynote speaker in main conferences of this theme and other themes. And he's a partner, a senior partner of Arnold, and he's editor in chief of the main scientific and empirical magazine of Place Brand. And he's a consultant of governments from all over the world. He's responsible for the building of place brands in many countries, many cities, many regions. So it would take me so long to say everything about Robert Covers that I won't take the stage and any longer to present, because nobody wants to hear me. Everybody wants to hear Robert. And after Robert's presentation, I can speak a little bit more about the course. But I'll just, before passing the floor to Robert, let me just tell you that this place branding and place marketing post-graduation course teaches how to build place brands, cities, regions, countries, but connecting with company brands to leverage the economic growth and the internationalization to attract talent, which is the new gold, exportation, foreign direct investment, and all of those things that places want to attract, because every place, regardless of its size, of its location, every place has something special to offer. And it's not propaganda, it's not marketing, it's place brand. Obviously, marketing is important. That's why we have place marketing also in the course, but the building of the thing is the main subject. So we teach how to do that. It's an e-learning course. It has only 3 moments that people are together physically, a network welcome session in order to present the students, the teachers, the speakers, some partners. And in the middle of the course, we make a visit to a big company in Portugal, which is Navigator. We're going to Aveiro and Figueira da Foz to meet that company, which is the leader in premium paper exportation, and also uses their tree plantations to produce a special energy, which they'll explain it. And in the end, we have an immersive weekend where the students present the work they've developed during the course, because this course is very practical. The evaluation that we make is the project that the students develop during the course with us, which is based in their reality, their place or their company. Usually they get together and develop a project that allies places with companies. And we have some projects that were developed in the previous edition of the post-graduation that are being applied in the field. And me, myself, I'm supporting some of those projects, and this is it. And in the end, we have that weekend where they present their project, and we have a dinner with show cooking and special products, Portuguese products, with a chief that cooks that with us, and it's very funny. And then we have our graduation ceremony. We were there this weekend, the graduation ceremony of all the courses of ISCTE Executive Education. We were in the main saloon of Casino Estoril. It was small for all of us, wasn't it, Jose? We almost had no place to sit, because it was really full and it was really fun. It was a great ceremony. It always is. And with the prize of best student and best teachers distribution, and lots of fun also. And this is it. So now I give the floor to Robert Govers, and I'll be able to clarify anything that you need to know about the course afterwards. Thank you so much, Robert. It's an honor to have you with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. I'm blushing. It's too much. I will share my screen. I will be using Mentimeter. So I suppose that even when you're on YouTube Live, you should be able to watch the screen there and maybe scan the QR code. So then I can see how many of you are actually there, because I can't see that on Zoom. So please scan the QR code and participate in my lecture, because it will be very interactive. I will also be doing a quiz. So there'll be, I don't know what the prize will be. I guess eternal fame, or maybe free access to the graduate program. No, I'm joking. But I look forward to, yes, of course, some people are registering already for participants. So this is the title of my presentation, The Sense and Nonsense of Place Branding and Marketing. So my objective will be to get a better handle on what we really mean when we talk about place branding versus place marketing, some of the things that do make sense, what does make sense, what works, what doesn't work, and also some of the nonsense that we see in the practice of place branding. So my name is Robert Govers, as Denise was already so kind mentioning all my credentials. So I'm chairman, or not CEO, but founding chairman of the International Place Branding Association. Sorry for the dogs. If you're hearing dogs, that's my wife coming home. Should be done very quickly. So I'm founding chairman of the International Place Branding Association, which is mainly an academic network. We have an annual conference, just took place in Manchester. Was a great event, one of the biggest we've ever had, 150 participants. Great success. And next year we will be coming to Lisbon. So that might be interesting for some of you in the audience. We also have an academy where we run short courses. It's not like full master's programs or anything like that. They're short courses, and it's completely online because it's quite global. We have it's always small groups, but participants from all over the world. And we have also published a place branding manifesto, which we publish because it's our perspective of how you would how you would define place branding from the IPBA's perspective. So it's underlined here. It's a web link. Obviously, I'm not going to show it to you now, but I can share the presentation afterwards, and then there you can find the web link. So if you're interested in that manifesto, you can click on the link or just go to placebranding.org, and that's our website for the IPBA, placebranding.org. And that's where you can see information about the conference in Lisbon, as well as the manifesto, as well as the academy. I'm no longer, by the way, chief editor of the Journal of Place Building and Public Diplomacy. I handed over a year ago to Magdalena Florek, also a board member in the IPBA, and she's now I'm emeritus editor of the journal, of course, still on the editorial board, but I'm not in charge of the journal anymore. That's Magdalena at the moment, who, by the way, will also be speaking on your program, right? And then I'm also a senior partner at Anholt & Co., which is on the one hand side, it's a consulting business. So we advise governments in cities, regions, and countries. But we also run, and it's quite important, the Nation Brands Index that you might have heard of. So it's the only measurement of national image that has been running for 20 years. So we've got 20 years of data. The methodology is consistent. So we've got, in exactly the same way we measure each year the name awareness and the reputation of 50 countries. We do that in 20 panel countries, so in 20 markets, 40,000 respondents. Simon Anholt, so my partner and the chairman of Anholt & Co., created the Nation Brands Index in 2004. He then ran it for 3 years himself. Then it was the IP was licensed to GfK. They ran it for a long time. Then that division of GfK was bought by Ipsos, and Ipsos has been running it for a couple of years. But since January last year, so now almost 2 years, we've taken it back in-house, and we're now running it ourselves. And this is, of course, a big part of the business. Now, at Anholt & Co., we've got a couple of principles, and I think this also links back to the rest of the presentation. You will see these things coming back in my presentation. We believe in the diplomacy of deeds. So it's not so much about communications, but it's more about the things that you do. So we believe in the idea that in order to build a reputation, you've got to do the right thing. You have to contribute to humanity and the planet, and not just tell the world how great you are. It's not about telling your story. It's about making a difference in the world. It's very much about collaboration. So it's a well-designed coalition of government, business, and civil society that builds the national or the city profile, not a hired communications agency. It doesn't need to be expensive because we do massive advertising campaigns, and usually in practice, a lot of countries and cities spend quite a bit of money on nation or city branding because they're buying media space, so they're buying big advertising space, which of course is expensive. We don't believe in that. We believe in stakeholder collaboration and building this coalition and getting that coalition, getting that network to reflect the brand of the city or the country and the things that they do, and to come up with what we would call symbolic actions or imaginative initiatives. I'll come back to those ideas later on and give you some examples. Managing image and promoting individual sectors are very different things. So that's why I say I'm going to allude, or not allude to, I'm going to explain our perspective to what the difference is between branding a place versus marketing. We think they're very different things, and they require very different approaches. And it's usually easier to see that happening at a national level, where you would have what we call externally facing agencies. So those are agencies that engage internationally. And at a national level, very often we see that there are specific agencies, for instance, for tourism promotion, for investment promotion, for export promotion, for talent attraction, for investment attraction, and so on and so forth. So they do the marketing. What we say is you need an overarching strategy for your image, and you probably need a separate organization for that. But they need to bring in all those externally facing agencies, as well as big business, public sector, private sector, civil society organizations into that coalition. So they're aligned and they're linked to each other, but they have different objectives and therefore different mechanisms and different processes and tools. And of course, lastly, science before opinion. And that's why we have the Nation Brands Index, the Good Country Index. The Nation Brands Index is a commercial product. It's a syndicated research, so the subscribers pay for the Nation Brands Index. And obviously it's expensive because we're doing 40,000 surveys each year, and that costs money. The Good Country Index is open source. You can find it, just Google it, Good Country Index. It's very easy to find. It's free, it's open source, and because there we measure what the actual impact is that countries have outside of their borders. So there we measure the real impact on humanity and the planet that a country has, for instance, in its contribution to global culture, in its contribution to science and technology, in its contribution to peace and security, to environment, sustainability, to health and well-being, and so on. But focus on what is the impact that the country has outside of its borders. And we use existing data for that, mostly United Nations systems data, and that's why it's open source. And we expect to publish the new Good Country Index in the coming months, so quite soon actually. So we do these things because we believe in data, we believe in data-driven strategies and implementation of branding. So that's a brief overview of the my most important affiliations. As mentioned, I also supervise the master theses at the Rotterdam School of Management, Erasmus University in Rotterdam. Anyway, too much to mention, but those are my main affiliations: IPBA and the and Anhalt & Co. So here's the QR code again. I can only see 19 participants, so I'm assuming that there are more participants on the YouTube live. Do we have more people on the YouTube live? Maybe Carolina can confirm, or
I don't know. Sometimes people enter later, and it happens, and sometimes the link to accept goes to spam, and they don't visualize that and don't enter.
well, if they
Sometimes
just
it happens. It happens. Some people sent me messages telling me that they couldn't enter, and I said, go and watch your spam and so on. So
there's no email involved, so there's no
yeah.
spam involved. Spam doesn't make a difference. You just either scan the QR code from the screen,
Yeah.
or you go
Okay.
to menti.com. You just open a web browser on your phone or your tablet or on your desktop, wherever you're watching, or on an additional device. An additional device is usually easier. You just open a web browser, type in menti.com. It will bring you to the website, and you just type the code 76001429. Easiest thing to do is just to scan the QR code, and that should bring you immediately into the presentation. I can see people coming in, so that's great. I'll just continue my presentation. Whenever I can, I'll show the QR code again for those people who have joined in a little bit late. But obviously, in the interest of time, we need to continue. but there's still slowly people coming in, so that's a good thing. Okay, so because I think I already have a question for you, so let's see what you think of this. Two questions actually. I want you to rate two statements, whether you believe that places are brands, and whether you are confident about that statement. So do you believe, do you agree or disagree that places are brands? And are you confident about that? So you say, yeah, I'm for sure, I know perfectly what I'm talking about. Places are brands, or this whole thing is ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. What are you talking about? Places as brands, etc. So please just very quickly fill in those scales.
I'm sorry, Robert, can you share the code again? Because
Yeah.
I was having trouble entering. Can you please share the code again?
I'll try and do that if I can find it. Oh, here
Or
we go.
just say it
Yep,
loud.
there it is. There it is. You should
No,
see it on
no,
screen.
not the QR code, the number, the code to join, the
It's on top
number.
of the screen. 76.
76001429.
Hold on. I didn't hear.
7600
1429.
Yes. The plane didn't let me hear. 7600.
1429.
Thank you.
It's on top of the screen. It's almost always on top of the screen.
Oh,
So
okay.
if
I
you're
couldn't
entering
see it.
late, you can always go to menti.com
Okay.
and type in the code
Thank you so
or
much.
use the
Thank you.
QR
Thank
code.
you. Thank you. Okay.
Okay. Some more. Okay, the responses are coming in. 14 out of 20. So we've got 25 participants already. I've got 14 responses. I'm going to start showing the results in the interest of time. But if you're still filling it in, if you're still trying to participate, please just continue. You can still participate. We'll do a quiz a little bit later on. And what we'll do is I'll send you a copy, a hard copy of my book, Imaginative Communities, to the winner. Okay, so maybe that's a bit of a stimulant. Maybe it stimulates you to participate in the quiz
Thank
later
you.
on. So you can win a free copy of my hardback book. Okay, so let's show the results here. And is there, oh, there's a lot of spread, as you can see. So on average, yes, you believe that places are brands and you're confident, but there's a lot of variation. So most of you, apart from two people, believe that places are brands. So one individual is quite critical, clearly, which is good. But you're not very confident. So there's a variation in terms of how confident people feel about this. All right, so that's great. I have a job to do in the next hour and a half. To convince you that places are brands, but also to increase your confidence about that statement. And I can still see responses coming in. So thank you, and still people joining. So thank you for doing that. But I'm going to move on. I think we're going to enter into the quiz. My question here is, which countries do you see in this slide? And you only need to name one. So you have to choose an avatar and give it a name. That we have 10 questions in the quiz. Halfway the quiz, we will see who's on top. And then at the end, obviously, we'll see who the winner is. But there's like 26 participants on the Menti. So I'm expecting at least 20 participants in. Please get on it. Please join quickly. 14, 15. Any more participants? You can win a book.
I'm doing
And they're
this to
easy
win your book.
questions.
To win your book. But in English, Spanish, or Portuguese?
You can choose.
Let's choose Portuguese.
Okay. All right. I'm going to start the quiz. We've only got 15 players, but you can still join if you're joining. And if you're new on YouTube Live, open a web browser, menti.com, and use the code that you see on the screen.
Sorry to interrupt you. Let me just, I'm always very curious about the translation of the book into Portuguese and
1
Spanish.
second, Denise, 1 second, because we're starting the question. Which country? Just type one name. So we need one name of a country that you see on the slide. Oh, only 6 responses. So we have Paris, France. The correct answer is China. The answers are only Paris and France. Those are the only 2 that we get. So yeah, I can understand that you're seeing the Eiffel Tower. All of these are places in China. So they're all, there are copies of Hallstatt, Austria, Interlaken, Switzerland, Holland on the top right, and then of course Paris, but they're all replicas. It's all fake replicas of these places. They're all either real estate developments or resort developments in various cities around China. And that for me is actually the proof that places are brands. It's as simple as that, because what does it mean to build a brand? It means to build brand equity. And brand equity is you have name awareness and you conjure up in people's minds, you conjure up positive associations. And that's what happens here. So these places obviously have brand equity because these Chinese developers believe that if we create places that represent these cultures and that represent these European places, European architecture, they believe that it will add value to their offering, right? So you've got a big rural class moving into the city. So in China, there's a big movement into the cities, and you've got these middle class people that have made some money, middle class, rising middle class, they're moving into the cities. And to have a European style property is aspirational. It gives them status. So that means it's more value to them than any other type of standard development. Because these places are exploiting the brand equity of Paris, the brand equity of Holland, brand name Holland, the brand equity of Interlaken or Switzerland or Hallstatt or Austria. So that to me is proof. They can do that free of charge. If you wanted to create a Disney city in China, you would have to go to Orlando and get a license from Disney to do it, and you would have to pay hefty fees in order to be allowed to do that. But of course, places like these, particularly with historical architecture, you can just copy freely and you don't have to pay any license, but you do get the brand equity that goes with it. So that proves to me that places are brands. Now, of course, not every city, not every region, not every country has this global attraction as these places do, but still they will have a certain catchment area. They will have a certain geographical coverage where their name awareness and their reputation is relevant among their audiences. Okay, so that's for that example. So places are brands as equity is built through, the brand equity of the place is built through, or for any brand, on the sender perspective, you want something that identifies you and you want to decide what your brand values are. You want to reflect the brand values in the things that you do. Then through communications channels, but also through reality. Of course, reality also communicates the physical appearance of a place or the experience that people have traveling there or studying in a place and so on. That also communicates. So through channels, you build, based on identification, you build recognition, name recognition, and associations. And that on the receiver end builds name awareness and meaning, right? So that makes the concept of brand very complex because there is a sender perspective. You have to deal with identification and deciding on your brand values. There's a communications perspective and there's a receiver perspective. And all of these things are part of the concept of branding. Some people will say brand is in the mind of the consumer. It's perception. Well, that only stresses the importance of the receiver. But brand is also strategy. It's also the decisions that you make as a sender. So for me, branding is about bridging these gaps between, on the one hand, the complexity of a place, its identity and its identification, and how it reflects its values, which is very complex and involves many stakeholders and is heterogeneous on the one hand, and bridging then the gaps to people's name awareness and reputation on the receiver end, which is very often very much cliche and stereotype. So it's actually a huge challenge to bridge these gaps, and that's what makes place branding such a complex exercise. Sorry, Denise, you wanted to ask a question?
Yes, Robert. I was very curious about the translation of your book, which is the brand itself in between the place branders, among the place branders, and it was translated to Spanish and Portuguese. As long as I know, it was translated to these two languages.
It's thanks
Why
to
did you
colleagues.
choose? Why did you choose these two languages?
It's thanks to colleagues that were willing to do it and add their own chapter. So Jorge de San Eugenio Vela in Barcelona, he helped me. Well, he translated the book and added a chapter of himself. And Caio Esteves, who is Brazilian, he did the translation into Portuguese and also added his own chapter.
Oh,
It's as simple as that.
Caio as Madalena. I'm sorry for my mistake. I said CEO. It's not CEO. It's chairman. I'm so
No,
used
don't worry.
I'm so used to deal with CEOs that I call everyone CEO. I
Never
forget
mind.
the word president and chairman.
Never mind. Don't worry about it.
And I know Madalena is in charge of the
Sure.
magazine the magazine sorry and I thought that and Caio and Madalena are both going to be speakers at the post-graduation course.
Yeah.
And I thought you were going to say that you chose those two languages because both of those languages are spoken by many people all over the world.
Of course.
And we are always fighting for the Portuguese language value and cultural and economic value and so on. But the reasons were different, but it serves this purpose also.
No, you're
Sorry to
absolutely right.
interrupt
It
you.
is because these are big language areas. Obviously, that's the main decision. I'm a Dutchman. I'm from the Netherlands originally, so my native language is Dutch. I'm not a Brit. But I didn't translate the book into Dutch because what's the point? It's a very small language area. So you're absolutely right. Of course, it is also because these are major languages, but also because Jordi and Caio were so nice and collaborative to work on the translation.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on. So this is for me what the essence of branding is, and then of course, and this is true for any, whether it's personal branding, place branding, or commercial branding. This is what you're dealing with: a sender, a channel, and a receiver perspective. And these are the things that you try to do: create name awareness and meaning in people's minds of your external audiences. However, what works in commercial branding doesn't necessarily work in place branding, and that's what we're going to focus on in the presentation. So, why? But first of all, some context. Why does brand equity for places matter? Right? What does it bring at the end of the day? Why are we concerned about our reputation? And this shows you a graph with about countries. This is just countries because, of course, cities is always a little bit more difficult because the data is not always there. But for countries, of course, there's lots of data freely available through the United Nations systems. So here you find on the vertical scale country image, which is the ranking in the Nation Brands Index, which I've already talked about. And on the horizontal scale, you've got international earnings. So we looked at tourism arrivals, tourism spend, attraction of foreign investment, and exports. And we created another indicator, a composite indicator based on those three parameters, which gives you an idea of the size of the international earnings of a country. And the size of the bubbles is GDP. So that's just the size of the economy of these countries. Now, as you can see, there's clear positive correlation between image and international earnings. So if people are more familiar with you and you have a positive reputation, it just means you can make more money. Now, of course, correlation doesn't necessarily mean causation. So it probably also works the other way around. If you engage a lot internationally economically, so you export a lot of goods, you bring in a lot of foreign investment, you get lots of tourists, obviously that also assists your image. So it's a virtuous cycle. But clearly there's a relationship between your image as a country and your international earnings. However, you see some outliers, but it's very interesting because the outliers actually confirm the narrative. Because if you look at the top left, you see outliers like Iceland, New Zealand, Finland. So they don't get the international earnings that you would think they would get considering their reputation. In other words, they've got a very strong reputation, but they don't actually get that much international earnings. Well, that's easily explainable because obviously this is about location. They're just isolated places. They're relatively difficult to get to. They're remote, and that's why it's more difficult for them to benefit from their strong image in terms of their international earnings. Then on the other end, at the bottom right, you've got UAE and Saudi Arabia that get more international earnings considering their image, and that's of course because they have natural resources. That's just oil and gas that brings in a lot of international earnings, despite them having not such an amazing strong image. So brand equity is important. Brand equity is built in a certain way. Places are brands because they have this brand equity, whether it's small scale or large scale. Now, the question is, what do we do in order to build that brand equity? Now, my question to you is, which one would you buy? So by now we've got participants. I will show the QR code for those of you who came late to the session. Maybe people still want to join. Which one would you buy? So you're you're cooking pasta bolognese tonight. Would you choose the Knorr spaghetti bolognese or the Bertolli bolognese sauce? Very quickly, just give me a quick answer. I see only 2 responses, so you need to be faster. Otherwise, we'll be here till midnight.
Some people might be driving and hearing us at the same time. This is the time that people leave their offices, and the event.
Well, then they shouldn't be participating.
Yeah, they shouldn't. But in Portugal, we don't respect that a lot. So maybe there's a policeman by their side and they don't want to,
So I've got
happens
13.
a lot. Happens a lot. I shouldn't say this online, but a lot, but it's
still
true.
people
It's true.
joining. Okay, I'm going to show you the results. So most of you, and this is to be expected, will choose Bertolli. Now, that's interesting, but I've got another question for you, which is more important. Why would you choose Bertolli? And I'll show the QR code again for those who came in late. Why would you choose Bertolli? Some of you didn't choose Bertolli, by the way, but why do you choose the brand that you choose? When I get to 10, I'll start showing the results. You can still fill in that question as we move while I'm showing the results. So product seems authentically Italian. Exactly. This is, of course, exactly the response that I had hoped for. That this would be the reason. Some people would say the glass jar, you can see what's inside. Some would recognize the brand. Even if you choose Knorr, you might say, I know the brand Knorr. I don't know Bertolli, so I might choose that. But most of the time when I do this little exercise, people will say, I will choose Bertolli because it's authentically Italian. The interesting fact is that, of course, both brands come out of the same factory. They're both Unilever. Well, they used to be absolutely correct. They used to be, for many, many years, Unilever brands. The whole Bertolli brand was sold by Unilever to another company. So now Knorr and Bertolli is not the same company anymore. But of course, the point is, it's not actually authentically Italian, right? But through the packaging and through the naming, they make us believe that this is, because the advertising, of course, shows Mama in the kitchen in the Tuscan hills. So they make us think that this is an Italian, authentically Italian product, but it's not. They're just fast-moving consumer good corporations like Unilever that produce these things. So here you see that you can use the packaging and the visual identity. Visual identity is what we refer to as everything from, logo, slogan, the design of the advertising campaign, the design of the packaging, the design of the web. That's all visual identity. The way it looks, it's design based. So here you see that visual identity in commercial branding works because it builds this name recognition of the brand Bertolli, and it builds these positive associations like this is Italian, the Mama in the kitchen in the Tuscan hills, through the advertising. Now, the point, of course, is that places are not in the supermarket, right? Bertolli and Knorr, this decision that you just made is a typical decision that you would make in a supermarket. You're going to cook pasta tonight, you're going to the supermarket. You have to make a snap decision very quickly. Which sauce am I going to buy? You recognize the brand, you see it's in the glass jar, it looks good, sounds Italian, I'll grab that one. Now, of course, places, particularly countries, but also cities, are not in the supermarket. You don't make snap decisions. Going study in a country, investing in a country, maybe buying its exports, but even then, those are complex decisions. And therefore, the visual identity is much less important also because you don't have control over the touch. Here, Unilever can make us believe it's Italian because they have complete control over the touch points between the product and the consumer, because they control the channel, the advertising, the online channels, the social media, and of course the shops, right? They've got contracts with supermarkets and they determine how their product is presented. So you get to consumers don't really get to interact with consumer goods beyond those touch points that the corporation controls. However, places are very, very different than that. By the way, there's also an interesting nation branding thing going on, of course, which is country of origin effect, which is part of the whole idea of nation branding. How can what does it mean if we say made in Italy or made in Portugal? What does that mean to the consumer? Which is, of course, part of the whole idea of place branding. So my argument is that visual identity is far less important in nation or city branding than it is in commercial branding. But let's see if that's true. So I'm going to show you a couple of logos, and this is again part of the quiz. I'm going to show you a couple of logos, and I'm going to show them very quickly. We're going to go fast, so you need to respond very, very, very quickly. So keep an eye on your phone. As soon as the question arrives, very quickly you'll have to choose. It's multiple choice, so it's very easy to do. But obviously, I don't want you to copy the image and go to ChatGPT and ask it which country it is. So that's why we're going to go fast. Right, which country is this? We've got, this is the second question. We've got 11 players. Any players joining? Come on, because there's 30 participants in the Menti. So there should be more participants, but again, like I said, you have to be fast. Okay, so here we go. Which country is this? Which country does this logo represent? Is of course the question. Is it the Bahamas, Bangladesh, Barbados, Belize, or Bolivia? You've got only a few seconds, so be very well done. Well done. That's very good. Okay, 4 correct, 4 wrong, but still, I think this is a majority, so well done. It's a 50-50 response in terms of wrong and right, but that's above chance, obviously. Another one. Which one is this? Very quickly. I think it's getting a little bit more difficult. Is this Laos, Latvia, Liechtenstein, Lithuania, or Luxembourg? Again, 4 correct answers. I think we have 4 experts on the YouTube live because these are usually. But then again, of course, we've got 9 incorrect answers, so 4 out of 13. But still, it's above chance. Well done. Last one. Is this Pakistan, Paraguay, Philippines, Poland, or Portugal. It's obviously not Portugal. I'm sure you know that. Paraguay, well done. Wow, amazing. Job well done. I guess you recognize the colors of the Paraguayan flag. The point, of course, is these logos are not recognized, but they've cost a lot of money. All of these nation branding exercises have been quite, cost hundreds of thousands of, if not millions of dollars if they're doing advertising. And people still usually, I mean, here we've got an expert audience to some extent, I believe, but usually when I do this with students, for instance, they have no idea. They have just no idea what countries are represented by these logos. The point is places are identified and recognized by their name. And I'm always shocked and surprised that we never talk about the name. Because in commercial branding, Bertolli, we've been discussing Knorr and Bertolli, just the name sounds more Italian. Knorr obviously doesn't sound Italian. Maybe it sounds German or Dutch. Knorr is what it is, by the way, in Dutch is what a pig does. So if a pig goes, that's Knorr. And it's also a brand name in the Netherlands. So it's not a very good brand name in the Netherlands. And I believe also not in Germany. But it certainly doesn't sound Italian, and Bertolli does. So, and of course, Unilever decided to give the product that name. And this is hugely essential in commercial branding because the name is the trademark. You're choosing your name, maybe you're attaching a logo to it, and then you trademark it so that nobody else can use it. But of course, places already have a name. So this whole idea of trademarking is irrelevant. You cannot protect your name as a country or city, as a region, because the name has been around for many, many years. And people's surnames are very often named after those places. So there's no way you can legally protect the use of that name. And of course, that's what people attach the meaning to. People attach the meaning to the name Portugal. People attach the meaning to the name Lisbon or Porto, not to the logo that goes with it or not. It doesn't matter if there's a logo that goes with it or not. It really makes no difference, which doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a visual identity. Your visual identity has a purpose because, of course, you need a web design, you need stands at trade fairs, you need business cards, you need stationery. So the government and the people that make use what I call the externally facing agencies, like the tourist board and the investment agency and so on and so forth, of course it's helpful if they all understand the visual identity that they all could use and probably should use because it looks professional and you need it anyway, right? So there's a purpose for it, but it's not going to change your reputation, and that's the whole point. And there's another danger, which is it might be taking away attention, interest, and investment from what really matters, which is the content of the brand, the strategy of the brand. As soon as you start talking visual identity, that's where everybody focuses their attention on it instead of focusing on the things that are really important. And these are two studies, by the way, in JDMM, is a Journal of Destination Management and Marketing, where they've done empirical research that proves that logos and slogans are virtually irrelevant. These authors actually state that they've done the empirical research and they say logos and slogans are virtually irrelevant. One of them is interesting. It was a Bertelli and Laser. They interviewed people skiing in ski resorts in the Alps, both I think in Switzerland and Austria. So when they were waiting for the elevator to go back up, they would be interviewed and asked, "Do you recognize these logos?" And they didn't. Even when they were skiing in the resort, where they were showing the logo of the resort in which they were skiing, they still didn't recognize it, with the only exception of Zermatt, because in Zermatt the logo is on all the street signs, so it's basically unavoidable when you're there. But when they asked people in the other resorts, they didn't recognize the logo of Zermatt. So it has a function, but it's not going to change your reputation. So that's about identification. Jose is so far in the lead, and then France very close in second place. So let's see if they can maintain that in the second half of the quiz. Okay, well then, okay, so I'm claiming visual identity is not so important. Well, then people will ask me, what about consistency? Surely consistency in how you present yourself is important. And this is a slide that I was given when we were asked to tender for a project in the Netherlands. So, which a project that we won. So in 2018, we assisted the Dutch government in writing the national nation branding strategy with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as a client. And in the call for tender, they showed this slide. So they said, this is a real problem. All these different actors have their own logos, they have their own visual identities. It's a complete mess. And I asked them, so where did you get this slide? And they said, well, we hired an agency to study this for us. Now, that seems maybe like a logical thing to say and do, but you have to understand here that the group of people that was handing out this call for tenders, that was giving us the assignment, was the Holland Branding Group, at the time called the Holland Branding Group, and all the people that are most knowledgeable about the reputation of the Netherlands internationally and how it presents itself were in that group. So you would have the director of the Tourist Board, the director of the Netherlands Foreign Investment Agency, then, et cetera, and so on, for Public Diplomacy Unit, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So everybody and anybody who knows anything about how the Netherlands is perceived internationally and what it does to engage internationally were in that group. And they sort of had a hunch. They believed that there was this inconsistency, but then they paid an agency, a research agency, to study this for them to prove that there is inconsistency. So my point is, if this group doesn't really know for a fact that there is inconsistency, how on earth is an average consumer anywhere on the planet in a foreign country ever going to notice that there is inconsistency? They are not, right? If you're contemplating studying in a country, you might visit the Study in This Country website and maybe the Tourist Board website, but it's very unlikely that you're going to say, these websites look different. Why do they look different? Or, this is a different logo. People are just not going to ask that question. So consistency in your visual identity is nice to have. There's no harm in it. It looks professional. It's not a bad thing, but it's not going to make much of a difference. And people are just not going to notice it because people don't interact with other countries and cities that much. And when they do, it's usually in channels where the logo isn't shown anyway. We know from the research that what people think about other countries comes from their education, comes from their interaction with friends and relatives who have been to the country, comes from the news media, comes from social media. In all of those channels, they won't see the logo, they won't see the visual identity, but it's there that the image of the place is created. So there's something much more complex that needs to happen beyond this whole idea of visual identity. And of course, consistency to stand out. That's why we're doing it. Well, then my question is, well, this is the result, really, seriously? So you're doing nation branding. Of course, the whole idea is to stand out, to differentiate yourself, to create a unique positioning in the minds of consumers. That's why you're doing branding. And it's driven by the idea of globalization, that places become increasingly similar. So the homogenization, which is the result of globalization, that pushes us to do branding, because it becomes more and more important to create your own narrative. So they do branding, and this is the result. Everybody looks exactly the same. So it doesn't make any sense at all to have this approach. Now, to be fair, many of these are tourist board logos, but again, there's a problem there, because particularly if tourist boards start believing that they're responsible for the nation brand, you get into a whole other different discussion, because you don't want to put the nation brand and the reputation of the country in the hands of the tourism industry. That's a really bad idea. And Amsterdam, Venice, Barcelona have found out what that does to you. So be very careful what you wish for. So, and then people will ask me, well, then what about I Heart New York, I Amsterdam, Only Lyon? Surely those are best practices. Those are great examples of city branding. And my response is, well, if that is the case, then if it hadn't been I Heart New York but I Heart New Yarmouth, which is a city in the UK, if they hadn't done I Amsterdam but I Amherst, a city in the US, if it wasn't only Lyon but only Leonaki, a place in Greece, then if they would have done the same thing as New York, Amsterdam, and Lyon, they would now be famous. That's what you're saying. If these are the best examples of city branding, where these cities have created this reputation through those initiatives, well, if those other cities would have done it, they would now be famous and not Amsterdam, Lyon, and well, it's a rhetorical question, of course. You already know the answer to that. That's not the case. But my question to you is, 31 respondents, very good, and still people coming in. My question to you is, what is the difference between these two groups? What is the difference between I Heart New York, I Amsterdam, only Lyon, versus I Heart New Yarmouth, I Amherst, and only Leonaki? It's not part of the quiz. There's no right or wrong answers. Very quickly, it's multiple choice, so it should take just a second. And the QR code is still there. And if you can't scan the QR code, then open a web browser window and go to menti.com and use the code 76001429. Come on. Okay. Yeah, great. People are coming in. Very good. So you're saying global presence and historical fame. Of course, right? So you're absolutely right. New York, Amsterdam, and Lyon were already famous before they started doing this logo business. So the fame of the city has created the fame of the logos and not the other way around. And this is a very important point because we get, of course, most places are not world famous. Most places, even most countries, are not world famous like New York, Amsterdam, or Lyon. And they come to us and they say, we want to do nation branding. We want to do city branding like New York, like I Amsterdam. Oh, we're going to put letters in the streets so people can make pictures with it and share it on social media. If you're not famous, if nobody's ever heard of you, people are not going to do that. Maybe your residents are going to do that because among residents that would work. But a tourist is not going to make a picture of a logo of a place that nobody's ever heard of and then share it on social media, because then they're going to have to explain where they are. You want to show off. If you are in New York, of course you're going to buy the T-shirt because you want to show off that you are in New York. It's cool. Or Amsterdam, and you're going to buy the I Amsterdam T-shirt. You want to show off the fact that you're cool. You're in Amsterdam. Why is it cool? Because these are famous cities, have always been, despite the logos. Now it's a gadget, of course. It creates more engagement, and people, for a long time, of course, Amsterdam has had these big I Amsterdam letters on the Museum Square, which is a major tourist site in the city, and people did make pictures and share it on social media. So it's a catalyst for creating more engagement, but it doesn't change the reputation of the city. And in fact, they've taken those letters away in Amsterdam because they now have an over-tourism problem. And that's because they did all this just reinforcing the perception of sex and drugs and rock and roll in Amsterdam, instead of doing actual city branding, which is to manage the reputation of the city and steer it into a direction that's more sustainable. So for me, they're not necessarily best practices. In some cases, you might argue that they're actually bad practices because they've created more problems than they solved. The funny story is that now you will buy the T-shirt with I Heart New York and I Amsterdam. I'm of a generation, I don't know, of course I can't see you, but there's maybe some people on the YouTube live that are of my generation as well. Before the internet, what would everybody do is you would buy the Hard Rock Cafe T-shirt, right? You know the Hard Rock Cafes, they're still around, but the Hard Rock Cafes would always sell in their local shop. So in the Hard Rock Cafe New York, they would sell the Hard Rock Cafe New York. It would say New York. So the logo of the Hard Rock Cafe and then New York underneath it. Or the T-shirt, you could buy it in Shanghai with the Shanghai on it. So what people would do if you were visiting New York or Shanghai, first thing you would do is go to the Hard Rock Cafe, buy the t-shirt because that would be cool, because then you go back home and you would have the Hard Rock Cafe t-shirt Shanghai. So people are, whoa, you've been to Shanghai, right? That's cool. It's the same mechanism. People wanted to show off that they were there. Now they don't buy the Hard Rock Cafe shirts anymore. They would buy the logo. But it doesn't mean that the logo has changed the reputation. So good responses here. It's really historical fame and global presence. It's a different mechanism. It actually works completely the other way around. The city makes the logo famous as opposed to the other way around. Well, okay, so that's all about identification. Yeah, focus on the name. Don't worry too much about the visual identity. But there's also this idea of creating meaning. And then people believe that we have to use slogans to reflect the meaning that we want reflected in the brand. So again, let's see if this has worked. And this is the final part of the quiz. So please, again, quickly, you get very little time, answer these last 5 questions. 10 players, maybe a few more. Anybody else wants to join? Okay, let's go. Oh, yes, a few more. There we go. So let's see if you recognize these slogans. Incredible, which country? Here you have to type, so you get a few more seconds to type. Incredible, what country? India. I'm sure there are a few correct responses. There are no responses at all. You're too slow. Okay, that's no good.
My quiz is taking too long to open. I can
To
answer
load.
this is very it doesn't open. Maybe it happens to some other people. They
Yeah.
besides the ones who are driving, which
Never mind. Never mind. Okay, we'll try.
it's
The next one is multiple choice, so we can do it very quick. 18 players, well done. So be quick, okay? And I hope also open quickly on your device. So there we go. Answer quickly. The quicker you answer, the more points you get. So slogans build meaning. Let's make it happen. Which countries? Multiple choice. Let's make it happen. Is that Laos, Latvia, Liechtenstein, Lithuania, Luxembourg? Okay, good. We've got some responses here. Very well done. We have 7 responses, but 1 correct. So obviously that's just chance, right? That's just random chance. We've got a couple more, almost done this silly quiz. Again, slogan, make it happen, not let's make it happen, but make it happen. Which country? Uganda, Ukraine, UAE, Uruguay, Uzbekistan. Well done, you're fast. Well done. How do you know? I'm surprised with that. There's some reason why people know that make it happen is the UAE, but let's make it happen is Luxembourg. By the way, of course, why would you have let's make it happen and make it happen, and what does that mean? No idea. But anyway, you recognize it's not bad. 3 more. So the Pearl of the Caribbean. The Pearl of the Caribbean, is that Haiti, Jamaica, or Barbados? Only a few seconds, you have to be very quick. Well done, 14 responses. Sorry, it's Haiti, it's not Jamaica. 2 more. 19 players, you're getting into it. Great, well done. The Pearl of the Mediterranean. The Pearl of the Mediterranean. Is that Ibiza, Malta, or Montenegro? Sorry, it's Montenegro. Okay, so nobody recognizes the slogans, obviously. And another pearl, it's the last pearl. And there's some historical relevance to this pearl. The Pearl of Africa. What is the Pearl of Africa? Is that South Africa, Tanzania, or Uganda? Sorry, it's Uganda. And it was Winston Churchill who called Uganda the Pearl of Africa. And just to make the point, I didn't invent any of these. These have been, or still are, but I think most of them were in the past, but these all have been official logos and slogans of these various countries. and we just don't recognize them. We have no idea, right? So why would you spend money on pushing these things out? I don't understand it. And by the way, it doesn't mean anything. What does it mean to be repulsive, or what does it mean to be incredible? I don't know. Okay, so what's left then? If it's not about any of this, and I think many policymakers, many of our clients, when we first talk to them, think that it's about logos and slogans and advertising campaigns, and we then convince them that it's not. Well, what is it about? Well, you want to manage consistent associations that people have with the name, the associations that people attach to the name of your city, region, or country. That's what it's about. So it's still relevant because name awareness and positive associations linked to your name is still relevant, and you need to manage those. But you don't manage those like in the commercial world through visual identity. You manage them in some other way. It requires long-term focus, acting responsibly. It requires leadership, and very importantly, as I've already mentioned, stakeholder collaboration. It has to be a coalition of public, private, and civil society actors, because it's about the brand image, and because you want to influence the brand image on the receiver end. But brand identity, in terms of visual identity, which is so important in the commercial world, is not so important for place branding. What is most important in place branding is what we call brand purpose. So what is your strategy? What is your positioning? What are your values? And then how are you going to do real things, make real contributions, do real projects, initiatives, create the essence and the symbolic actions and the imaginative initiatives that reflect that positioning that you want to, your intended positioning. So, and of course, by the way, brand purpose is also a thing that businesses in the commercial world will talk about. They also talk about brand purpose, right? But the mechanisms through which they implement it is just quite different. It's also still, of course, about the actual product. It's also about real things, but the visual identity is relatively important and not so important for places. Because places are not like pasta, they're not in the supermarket. Brand purpose is key because places are complex and multi-channeled. They're hard to control and enforce because you're dealing with all these different stakeholders and different groups in your population. Of course, they're geographically linked. Lisbon is part of Portugal, Porto is part of Portugal. So what happens in Lisbon influences the brand Portugal and vice versa. So you've got these geographical linkages that you're dealing with, brand hierarchies that you're dealing with, makes it very complex. And of course, it's very political because we are talking about national identity, national culture, national values, and those can often be also contested politically. So it's complex, and that's why I've built in my first book, in my 2009 book called Placebranding, the 3-gap model, and that helps. I still use it today in all our advisory work because it really explains in clear terms. That's my experience anyway, that people really find it revealing, explains the mechanisms and the complexity and what works and what doesn't work. So first of all, there's the supply side on the right-hand side. That's the place, that's the city, that's the region, that's the country. Those are the stakeholders that are the actors there. And then there's a demand side, which is your external audience. Now, of course, at the end of the day, what we try to do is to change market behavior. We've got products to sell, much more complex than in a corporation, because even if you're talking about a large corporation like Microsoft or Apple or even Virgin, they're still in a certain industry. They're either in fast-moving consumer goods or in the tech industries, or almost always they're still in the specific industry. Now, places are not. Tourism, investment promotion, talent attraction, various economic sectors. They're very different things, and sometimes even competitive, right? So a very strong tourism image can sometimes be detrimental to a talent attraction image. And there's many examples of places where we work where we actually dealing with that. They're actually suffering from a too strong an image, which is too much focused on tourism, which makes it harder to attract talent and investment because people believe that they're just a frivolous place. So you've got all these this complex offering of all these different products that you're communicating in order to drive market behavior. Now that's of course marketing. It's marketing 101. Product market combinations. You're selling a product to a target market. And advertising is perfectly legitimate there because assuming you've done your research and you know who your target audience is, who is potentially a buyer of your offering, you target them and you can perfectly advertise the specific product. When we're talking about tourism, for instance, even multiple products. There's not, Lisbon or Portugal doesn't have one tourism product. It probably has several different types of tourism offerings. Cultural tourism, beachside tourism, other things, what have you. And then you've got the product and you can advertise that to your specific target audience. But that's marketing. It also is part of the branding, as we will see later on. But you're targeting there, and this is why I refer to the problem with what is termed destination branding, where you get tourist boards thinking that they are responsible for the image of the country, doing these massive global advertising campaigns, shooting with hail, trying to reach everybody, which doesn't make any sense. But because not everybody is in the market. Like Incredible India is the best example of that. It's actually a tourism campaign, spending lots and lots of money on massive global media coverage. But of course, most of these people are not in the market for potentially traveling to India. So why would you not? It would be much more effective and efficient, in my opinion, if you're on understanding what products you have to offer and then specifically targeting the right consumer. So that's marketing, right? It's different from branding. So what do we add to this model to refer to it as branding? Well, of course, it's about reputation. So we're not just trying to influence market behavior, we're trying to influence reputation. And reputation is the context. You're trying to create the positive context in which marketing messages can be received, right? So you're trying to create the name awareness of the place and the positive associations in people's minds, so that when they hear the marketing messages from the various product offerings, that they're open to it, that they have a positive outset, a positive outlook on interacting with the place. Then, of course, you're dealing with news media and social media, very much so than you're in branding than you are with marketing. Of course, those are also relevant to marketing, but they're particularly in branding very relevant because we know that places are being talked about in the news media and the mainstream news media and the social media. In order to do that, you want to put identity in the steering wheel. So this is about the identity of the city, the identity of the people. Who are we? Where did we come from? What's our history? Where are we today? And where do we want to go in the future? So it's about mentality of the people, the physical appearance of a place, the national identity, national culture, and so on and so forth. Because that can create the underlying current, the underlying essence of a place that influences everything else. And that's, because you want to create a consistent narrative at the end of the day. To put it metaphorically, you've got this big white arrow that's moving forward to the right-hand side. So it's a moving system, an economic system where you're having all these economic activities in tourism, in investment, in exports, and so on and so forth. So that's a forward-moving system that sort of creates a motion friction. There are all these engagements happening, also in the news media, in the social media, and in the things that you do. And you want to use that motion friction, channel it to create a consistent narrative in order to build your reputation. So that's the essence of place branding. It's about brand purpose and understanding how we want to position ourselves in order to then reflect that in as much as possible in the things that we do. Also in the marketing communications channels, but even beyond that. So when marketing is about product market combinations, branding is about building global name awareness and recognition, influencing external perceptions, and reinforcing pride. Reinforcing pride among the population is, of course, important because it's this coalition of all these actors. So the only hope that you have in bringing public sector, private sector organizations, civil society, in building the brand, you know, they need to be proud of what the place is, obviously. So a large part, an important part of what nation or city branding is about is also about this sense of interaction locally and reinforcing this sense of pride. There are some cases, for instance, South Africa puts a lot of effort, brand South Africa, I mean, puts a lot of effort into this idea of reinforcing pride, national pride among South Africans, more so than they do on international engagement. So that's the 3-gap model, and it allows us to get a clearer explanation of what's going on. For instance, the dynamics in the system, very important. So market behavior and news and mainstream media coverage are fast-moving targets. They change quite rapidly and quite easily. They're very much event-driven. So something happens in the media, something happens in your country, positive or negative, the news media coverage, people talk about it, but the next day it could be something else. And particularly in the age of Trump, obviously, we know that it's not even day by day, it's hour by hour that narrative changes. And also your market behavior. You know, you just have to do, in your marketing channels, just have to do a promotion or give people a discount and people will buy. So that's why your marketing strategy, what you offer and how you communicate, that's depicted here in orange, that can also change easily, not day to day, but certainly, you know, season to season, you can do promotions and advertising and campaigns and so on and so forth. However, reputation and identity are very slow moving targets. And we prove that in the Nation Brands Index and in the Good Country Index, which are both very, very, very stable. So countries don't easily change the fundamentals in how they operate or the fundamentals in how they're being perceived internationally. So there's a bedrock of perception and a bedrock of identity which changes very, very slow. It changes and it can change, but it changes very, very slowly. So that means that branding is very much long-term, where marketing could be short-term and medium-term. Branding is really, we're talking 10, 20, 30 years, and it's consistency and consistently hammering on the same nail, reflecting the same narrative of the place and the positioning that you're trying to achieve, and doing that for a longer period of time. So very, very different challenges. And then various roles you've got, of course, on the marketing side, you've got your sector organizations, so your hotel association, your tourism association, your association of major exporters, etc. Then you've got these externally facing agencies like the tourist board, the investment board, export agency. And then on the receiving end, of course, you're dealing with trading organizations, with media platforms, with broadcasting agencies, polling agencies. And what we want to do in branding office, a brand management office, sometimes at the national level, in some countries referred to as the soft power council. Very similar idea. It's a collective of individuals representing major exporters, the externally facing agencies, civil society organizations, and of course government agencies. And they come together in order to try to use this motion friction of the system to push it into a consistent reputation. And then, very important, which tools do we have? Well, local engagement, building local pride, very important. Then you've got your visual identity and image promotion. So that's your brand, you know, your visual brand identity and your advertising. And as I mentioned, it's not irrelevant, and particularly to get people to rally behind the brand locally, so within the country or within the city, to get your stakeholders and your population to rally behind brand, the visual identity can help you because it's the thing that people attach their effort to. So if they believe in the positioning and they believe in the values and the way that they're reflected in the visual identity, that can help locally in the effort and in building the local pride. But as I mentioned already, it's not going to change your image, and that's why you see the bubble here is still, it's a big bubble, but it's still on the supply side of things. What does change your reputation are what we would call symbolic, Simon Anholt would call symbolic actions, and I call them imaginative initiatives. So that's why my book is called Imaginative Communities, because for me, it's not really about places, but it's about communities, because it's the community that builds the place. And it's not about visual identity, but it's about doing imaginative stuff. So you want to do projects, policies, initiatives, events, etc., infrastructure that reflect the brand values. And you want to do it in such a way that it's imaginative, creative, original, captivating, inspiring, so that they become a story in themselves. They are real things, real initiatives, but they tell the story of the country or the city, and they get media attention because they're inspiring, they're captivating, they're imaginative. So that's the symbolic actions in Simon Anholt's books, and I would refer to them as imaginative initiatives. They're very similar things. So examples, The Hague, City of Peace and Justice, doing all kinds of things like a peace festival, doing conferences, making a real effort in trying to attract the specific conferences like the NATO summit recently. So they want to make sure that the things that they do reinforce this idea of positioning the city as the city of peace and justice. Oslo, a young pioneering city, is another good example. I'm not going to go through all. The ones that you will recognize, I hope, is a Happy Bhutan. So when in the late 90s there was a new king taking the throne in Bhutan, he really stressed the idea that well-being is maybe more important than wealth. So the whole idea of happiness in the country, well-being in the country, and people feeling positive about the country, he said, is as important as our economic development. And that then created the idea of measuring gross national happiness, created the Happiness Institute. They then worked together with the United Nations to spread this around the world. So, for instance, in Belgium, the country that I live, the Socio-Economic Council periodically measures gross national happiness, and it's based on the system that was created by Bhutan in collaboration with the United Nations through their efforts. There's a happiness summit. So these are all real things, and they've had a real impact. Quite a few countries nowadays even have ministers of happiness. So it has become a real thing. And it's really where it originated in Bhutan. And for instance, the whole tourism strategy also reflects that focus on well-being and sustainability. And by the way, they had some positive media attention during COVID when most countries were getting negative media attention. Bhutan was getting positive media attention because of the specific way in which they dealt with the pandemic. And the same is true for Estonia, the East state Estonia. When they became independent from the Soviet Union in the early 90s, they must have thought, we've been invaded and occupied so many times over the course of our history. What's the point of borders and territory? We're a small country with a small population anyway. But what if we create the most advanced e-state in the world so that we have an online state, a digital state, and that will maybe safeguard us from, create reputational security, but also safeguard us from future invasions and occupations. So they were the first country to write into their constitution that internet access is a human right. Then they created everything in the cloud. So now there are only two reasons why you need to go to Estonia, which is to register a birth, and of course you need to show the baby to prove that the baby is actually there, and to pick up your identity card or your passport. Buying property, voting in elections, opening a bank account, setting up a business, everything can be done online. So when they did that, when they had that, they were criticized for the vulnerability of their systems for cyber attacks. So instead of hiring IBM or Microsoft to solve that problem, they, again, with their own tech cluster, they have a very advanced tech cluster. They have a history in tech and innovation. Of course, that's why they did it. They got their tech cluster to solve what they call data embassies. So in their own embassies in befriended countries, I think the first country was Luxembourg. So in the Estonian embassy in Luxembourg, they have backup and processing power. So if there's a cyber attack in Estonia itself, they would have backup and processing power in other places, so they can keep the e-state afloat. It's very, very clever, all these things. And of course, then they created the the e-residency, where you can become a resident of Estonia without necessarily living there. So I have actually a friend in Suriname, Latin America, and Suriname has a historical relationship with the Netherlands, so he frequently visits the Netherlands because he's also got family there. And he picked up his e-residency card in the Estonian embassy in The Hague. And with that card, he's now running a legitimate European business out of Estonia from Suriname, and he's never been to Estonia. Now, those are amazing stories, and I think there's tens of thousands of people that do it now, and of course, this might not be known by big swathes of the population. So, average Joe in the street might not know about this, but for sure, elites, business people, tech entrepreneurs, they all know about Digital State Estonia. And again, they had, instead of most countries that had negative media attention because of COVID and how they dealt with the pandemic, again, Estonia, positive media coverage because, again, they had that tech cluster immediately deal with the pandemic, creating these tracking and tracing apps and so on. Other countries, like my country in Belgium, it took half a year to get this tracking and tracing app. They did it in weeks. But they also created what they call the digital nomad visa, and campaigned that they said to people, you're now working from home, make Estonia your new home, keep your job, you're working from home anyway, so keep your job, but come reside in Estonia, we'll give you a digital nomad visa, you can buy a house, open a bank account, rent a house or whatever, work from here, keep your job, and during the pandemic, join us here in Estonia. And again, so that's a positive story. And this is what is most clever about some of these great nation branding programs is, like I said before, they create the context in which things can happen, and they create. So here you've got that strategy, you know what you stand for, and if there's a crisis, you can immediately reflect on it and decide on an action that is on brand, so to speak, that is brand reinforcing, and therefore change the narrative that will be reflected in the news media and the mainstream and in social media. So why is it called the 3-gap model? I'm almost there. There's a strategy gap, so you want to make sure that what happens in the system is on brand, so that your identity, your national values are linked to the things that are happening in the channels and in other areas. So that's the strategy gap. Getting consensus and a coherent narrative about the country. Then there's a satisfaction gap. You want to make sure that you satisfy people's expectations. That's why we have the Nation Brands Index. You want to measure what cliches and stereotypes people refer to you, what their expectations are before starting doing branding, because of course you want to make sure that you're not contradicting their preconceived ideas. And usually it's much more efficient and effective if you take existing preconceived ideas and give them a twist, so to push them in a new direction, because that will open people's minds, and therefore you get access to their minds, to the mind space, and then there's hope that you can sort of manipulate their existing ideas into a new direction. That's usually the most efficient and effective way of changing your reputation, and therefore also bridging the satisfaction gap, because that's of course based on your reality. Assuming your strategy is right, then in the things that happen in the market, you're reinforcing your positioning, and therefore bridging the satisfaction gap. And then lastly, performance gap is it actually needs to happen. You actually need to fulfill expectations in reality, in the engagement with audiences. Okay, so who won this little contest? Whoa, this is a very strange result. I don't know what's happening here, but Dr. Centipede. So I would ask Dr. Centipede to contact Denise, and then we can sort out your address details, and I will send you the whatever English, Portuguese, or Spanish version of my book, which is Imaginative Communities, Admired Cities, Regions, and Countries, which says that place branding, to summarize the presentation, place branding is the community as a whole, finding purpose and shared identity, communicating through action with imagination and leadership, and through stakeholder collaboration. So thank you very much. Here is all my details if you want to get in touch. So Dr. Centipede, you can also get in touch with me directly. You've got my email address here, my websites. The three-gap model, as I mentioned, and the three-gap bridging model is another model that was published in 2009 in my book Place Branding, and you can also find them there on those web addresses. And I will, of course, share the presentation with Denise so she can share it with you. And that's it for me. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Robert. Can I ask you one simple thing? Do you think with this new global order that we are living, and I know that the challenges for nations and for countries are completely different nowadays. So nations are and countries are changing their own values. Do you think that all these type of approaches are also valid for this new order and these new values and the things like reputation and things like that? They have somehow gained new ways of thinking. So do you think this is all valid for what we are living now?
Yeah. Thank you very much. That's a very interesting question, Jose, and it's absolutely topical, obviously. And it's interesting because next week we will have the NL branding, so the Netherlands branding partner event at which I will speak, and it's exactly on this topic. And I will give you some of the revelations of the Nation Branding Index for this year, because that underlines the narrative that I will be presenting there, because I believe that it's absolutely crucial. And I know that many places and many countries are asking themselves that question. So in this transactional world where it's the right of the strongest, does it matter? So because public opinion is really unforgiving towards countries that are aggressors. The top 10 of the Nation Brands Index for the first time in its history has actually changed. So the top 10 countries that have been in the top 10 have always been, for as long as we've been measuring, so like I said, 20 years, have always been the same 10 countries. They might have been changing positions between them occasionally, but they've always been the same 10 countries. Not anymore. This year, the US dropped out of the top 10. It dropped 7 places, which is unique. We've never seen such a dramatic change ever. So it was number 1 brand for 8 straight years during the Obama administration. Then it dropped during Trump won. Then it stabilized, went up a little bit again during Biden administration, and now it dropped all the way down to number 40, which means that it's actually Spain who moved into the top 10, just because they moved from number 11 to number 10 because the space created by the US dropping out. So that means, and if we ask people, and also we did this for the first time in the Nation Brands Index, we actually asked open questions and then used AI-based content analysis to understand people's responses, because you have to imagine that those are thousands and thousands of responses. So you can't content analyze that manually. It's impossible almost. Well, would be too expensive. But now with, of course, AI content analysis tools, we've also asked people, have you become more positive or more negative about this country? And there's 2 exceptions. So most of the time people have become, most of the time they say, no, we haven't changed our minds. And if they say we have changed our minds, for almost all country, it's slightly more people that say we're more positive, which is probably the socially desirable answer, instead of saying we're more negative. 2 exceptions: the US, 30-40% of the people said we're more negative towards the US, and Israel, because of what's happening in Gaza, also suffering and also dropping quite dramatically. So this whole strongman idea and this transactional world is not being appreciated by your average consumer. But what is most interesting is that we saw Canada move up 3 places. Oh, by the way, when we ask people about, why have you become, we also ask them the open question, why have you become more negative? And we do a word cloud, that's Trump. It's just big letters, Trump. And people say, tariffs, Trump's foreign policy, Trump's aggression is what make people feel more negative. But what's most interesting is that Canada moved up 3 places. And if we ask, and there you would see that relatively more people are saying we're more positive about Canada than we used to be in the past. And if we ask them why, they will say they stand nonsense. They stand up to Trump. They stay firm, and we respect them for it. This is a good country, and it's not being bullied. It doesn't allow itself to be bullied. And then you see countries like the Nordics really doubling down on the whole idea of international engagement, values of openness, collaboration. Netherlands, same thing, still sticking to this. Their positioning is solving global challenges together. So it's really an invitation in the way that they present themselves. They want to collaborate internationally, be open, and try to solve the global challenges that we're facing together with other countries. And quite a few countries are doubling down on that. And I think that's the right thing to do, because that in the end is what will be appreciated by global audiences. So from a reputation perspective, I think it's more important than ever, and it's the right thing to do.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question? Jose, do you have another question, or can I ask a question?
No, yeah, of
Can
course.
I?
Sure.
I would like to, first of all, I loved your presentation and lots of things that you said. As I follow your work, I knew, but some are new to me also. But I would like to make a short comment and then ask you a question. Portugal started its country brand at the same previously before Spain, but Spain developed it better than we, and it reflects. It is reflected on our positions in the indexes, international indexes. You said Spain is in the top 10, Portugal is not. Spain has always 2 cities, Madrid and Barcelona, well positioned, and we don't have the same positioning. So we have this theme of place brand and country brand didn't develop in Portugal the same way, and it still is a thing that needs to create awareness between the political decision makers, the companies, the civil society, and so on. But an interesting thing is that Portugal, the name of the country, is written in the same way in the main languages: Portuguese, Spanish, English, French, Portugal, which is a strong thing, because the name of the country is something that is recognizable more than a logo, more than a slogan, as you said, more than a flag, even more than a flag. And I have a double question for you. As long as building a country brand takes more time, more stakeholders, it's a hard thing to do sometimes. Do you think that Portugal has an opportunity for its cities, its regions, to build brands that don't split from this idea of a country brand, but that leverage the country brand in kind of a, not of a top down, but as a bottom up mechanism, you know? Do you think that Portugal has an opportunity in that field? Because I believe so. But
Yeah,
I would
why
like
not?
to hear
Why
your
wouldn't they?
opinion.
Why
And
wouldn't they have?
yeah, and the other question is, it's totally different from this one. Artificial intelligence is everywhere. Do you think that artificial intelligence changes this matters? Does it influence the all these subjects? How do you think?
Yeah. Well, for sure. I envision that it will have a major impact because, of course, so when we're looking at the Nation Brands Index and how it has changed, we see that globalization has had a major impact. So we see scores of all countries going up, but particularly countries that are scoring lower in the index are moving faster than other countries. And we believe that that's because of globalization and social media. People are just more familiar with other countries more generally than they were 20 years ago, because it's, you know, you see them on constantly on TikTok and Instagram and in the mainstream media, and people talk, and of course people travel more. So people have become more familiar and opinionated about other countries, more so than in the past. And a big driver of that is social media. And of course, the biggest problem that we're facing at the moment is this polarization that's taking place in social media, which is happening everywhere. No country is immune to it, and of course, therefore, also um, um manipulation by foreign agents, and you know how places are being talked about. You know, not to mention Russia, of course, trying to influence and be a catalyst in driving polarization in many countries. Not because they create their own narrative, but they're using the polarization that's already there and pushing it to make it even stronger. And that doesn't help most places. Now, my hope is that, well, on the one hand, AI will obviously make that even more aggressive, because you know, if you can do this manipulation using AI, it will become a landslide. But of course, AI can also help us dealing with it, and dominating the narrative. So yes, I think we will see major field driven by AI in the future. Maybe it's already happening. You know, you see it just like election meddling, right? So influencing elections, like the Brexit in the UK, or you know, the elections in the US, being influenced by foreign actors, polarization happening. You know, you really have divided groups now in some of these countries, also happening in Europe. That's relatively new. So that's happening, and that will be exacerbated. It will become even stronger in the future. And my hope is that we can also use the positive side of AI in order to deal with that and try to bring people back together again. But I don't, by the way, I don't see why Portugal shouldn't be able to do a bottom-up. Many countries do. And you're right, I guess that Spain has maybe been more successful in nation branding, somewhat more successful than Portugal, but it's not. I don't think it is because of their advertising or their logo. It's because things just changed in Spain since the junta, since Franco. And then, of course, they've had Olympic Games, they had the Expo in Seville. Barcelona is a completely unique city with its Gaudi heritage. Seville is a unique city. I'm not saying that Portugal doesn't have unique cities, because, of course, Lisbon and Porto are quite unique, but they don't have the same profile, I would say, in people's minds. They don't conjure up the same strong images and associations that some of those elements that those assets that they have in Spain do.
I see that as an opportunity.
Yeah.
Since Portugal is not so developed in place branding, this is a very new theme here. People, and we see that when we explain the course to people, they don't know what we're talking about. It's a thing that it's very new in Portugal. You go to Spain and other countries, and they for instance, Brazil and Northern Europe, UK, Ireland, they all know what's Placebrand. They have Placebrand in small cities. It's a thing that it's, isn't it, Robert? It's well, it's different in Portugal. It still is a thing to teach people.
To develop,
and yeah, it's
yeah, I
very
guess
new.
so.
and it's a big challenge for us to create this awareness between the social society, even the decision makers and the companies and so on. But I face it as an opportunity, as a field to discover and to develop. I don't face it as the thing that it's condemned not to be successful. I face it the other way around, as an opportunity to develop the Placebrand in Portugal. And the thing
Sorry,
is that
Denise, there was one question on the Menti, but I'm not sure if I understand the question. Apple's related with New York. I guess you mean the Big Apple. Do you consider an exception? I'm not sure if I'm with the. I don't know. I don't think I understand the question, but it's okay. Maybe you can ask on the chat in YouTube.
yeah, the people were saying that it happened the same to me. In the mobile phone, we couldn't open the quiz. It didn't open, so we couldn't answer, and it was hard for us to. I could answer one or two questions, but the others I just couldn't. It didn't open, and
Sorry to hear that. Maybe
yeah,
internet
yeah.
connections.
But I think you proved your point with the quiz. You really did that.
That was the idea.
Yeah, it was a very interactive way of proving your point, a very interesting way of proving your point. And
Thank you.
I thank you very, very much. We were planning the session to end at 7:30. We are. I told you at 8, but it was 7:30. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. Yes.
That's all right.
And yeah, not to take so much time from you, and because Portuguese love to eat and they love their food. I think we have the best food in the world, and everybody loves to have dinner at 8 at home. And so this was the timing that we tried to make the session,
Sure.
but we knew that lots of people would be driving, but we couldn't make this during the day because the students we are trying to catch are people who work, who have to study after work. So we thought this was the time to catch them. And I really thank you once more for being with us. We're going to have Magdalena opening the first webinar of the course, but of course we'll keep in touch. And I hope that when you come to Lisbon next year, maybe you can come to Isqueté, who knows, and make a
You
conference.
are
It would be
already
great.
invited.
Thank you very much.
It's the floor of José. It's the floor of José. It's
Okay, Robert, thank you very much. We have to close here because time is time, and we have 1.5 hours of this. It was very, very interesting.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for being with us. And thank you all, also to the public that is, I don't know, at home, in their cars, everywhere, that listened to you and watched you. So thank you very much to everyone.
You're very
And,
welcome.
we
Thank you
had
for the
people
invitation.
we have people from
yeah,
Brazil
we have people
also.
from Brazil, I'm seeing.
Ah,
Okay. Thank you very much.
very
Bye,
good.
Rob.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. And good luck with the program.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.